In 1987, one of America's most trusted law enforcement officers simply walked out of his life and never returned. FBI agent Michael Harrison was a decorated veteran with 15 years of impeccable service, a man who had dedicated his career to hunting down the country's most dangerous criminals. Yet on a cold October morning, he left his suburban home for what should have been another routine day at the bureau and vanished without a trace. Harrison's disappearance sent shockwaves through the FBI community. This wasn't just any missing person case, this was one of their own. The initial investigation revealed troubling details that painted a picture of a man living a double life. His colleagues described him as methodical, reliable, and intensely private. His wife Sarah reported that he had been increasingly distant in the months leading up to his disappearance, often working late into the night on cases he claimed were classified. The first major break in the case came when investigators discovered that Harrison had been making unexplained trips to various cities across the country. Hotel receipts and rental car records showed a pattern of travel that didn't correspond with any official FBI business. More disturbing was the revelation that he had been withdrawing large sums of cash from multiple bank accounts, systematically emptying his savings in the weeks before he vanished. As the investigation deepened, a darker picture began to emerge. Harrison had been working on several high-profile organized crime cases, including an ongoing investigation into a powerful crime family with connections stretching from New York to Las Vegas. Federal prosecutors had been building a major RICO case, and Harrison was one of the key agents gathering evidence. The timing of his disappearance, just weeks before crucial testimony was scheduled to be presented to a grand jury, raised immediate suspicions about whether he had been compromised. The FBI launched one of the most extensive missing person investigations in its history. They analyzed Harrison's phone records, scrutinized his financial transactions, and interviewed hundreds of contacts from his personal and professional life. Polygraph tests were administered to his family members and closest colleagues. Surveillance footage from airports, train stations, and bus terminals was reviewed frame by frame. Yet despite the massive manhunt, Harrison seemed to have vanished into thin air. 4 years passed with no credible leads. The case had gone cold, relegated to a dusty file cabinet in the Bureau's Unsolved Cases division. Harrison's wife had moved on with her life. His children had grown up without their father, and his former colleagues had largely given up hope of ever learning the truth. The FBI had quietly begun to assume that Harrison was dead, likely murdered by the criminal organizations he had been investigating. Then came the phone call that changed everything. In March 1991, a storage facility manager in Phoenix, Arizona, contacted local police about an abandoned storage unit. The rent hadn't been paid in over a year, and according to company policy, they were preparing to auction off the contents. When they cut the lock and opened the unit, what they found inside would crack open one of the FBI's most perplexing mysteries. The storage unit contained boxes upon boxes of meticulously organized files, photographs, and documents. At first glance, it appeared to be the work of someone with law enforcement training. Everything was cataloged, cross-referenced, and stored with obsessive attention to detail. But as investigators began examining the contents more closely, they realized they were looking at something far more sinister than abandoned evidence files. The documents revealed a complex web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement. There were detailed surveillance reports on federal judges, prosecutors, and even high-ranking FBI officials. Photographs showed meetings between Harrison and known associates of organized crime families, the very people he was supposed to be investigating. Bank records documented payments totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from criminal organizations into accounts controlled by Harrison. Most shocking of all was Harrison's personal journal, found in a locked briefcase at the back of the storage unit. In his own handwriting, the missing agent had documented years of accepting bribes, passing classified information to criminal contacts, and actively sabotaging federal investigations. The journal read like a confession, detailing how he had been recruited by organized crime figures early in his career and had spent over a decade operating as a double agent within the FBI. The discovery sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community. Internal affairs investigators worked around the clock to assess the damage Harrison had caused during his years as a mole. Dozens of criminal cases had to be reviewed and many convictions were overturned due to compromised evidence. The storage unit contents also revealed the identities of other corrupt officials who had been working with Harrison, leading to additional arrests and prosecutions. But the most pressing question remained unanswered. Where was Michael Harrison? The storage unit had been rented under a false name, paid for with cash, and the trail went cold there. Some investigators theorized that Harrison had been murdered by his criminal handlers once his usefulness had ended. Others believed he had been given a new identity and was living somewhere under witness protection, having made a deal with federal prosecutors in exchange for his cooperation. The truth, when it finally emerged, was more complex than anyone had imagined. Harrison had indeed been killed, but not by the criminals he had been working for. According to classified documents that wouldn't be released for another decade, Harrison had been attempting to extract himself from his criminal associations when he disappeared. He had been planning to turn himself in and cooperate with federal investigators, but his former handlers had discovered his intentions. The storage unit had been Harrison's insurance policy, a detailed record of his criminal activities and those of his co-conspirators that he had planned to use as leverage in plea negotiations. He had apparently hidden the storage unit key before his death, hoping that its contents would eventually be discovered and used to bring his killers to justice. The Harrison case became a watershed moment for FBI internal security procedures. The Bureau implemented new oversight mechanisms, enhanced background checks, and psychological evaluations for agents working on sensitive cases. The scandal led to congressional hearings and significant reforms in how federal law enforcement agencies monitor their own personnel for signs of corruption. Even today, more than 3 decades after Harrison's disappearance, the case continues to have ramifications. Cold case investigators occasionally uncover new evidence connected to the criminal network Harrison had been part of. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of organized crime and the constant vigilance required to maintain the integrity of law enforcement institutions. The storage unit discovery ultimately provided answers to Harrison's family and colleagues, but those answers came at a terrible cost. The revelation that a trusted FBI agent had been living a double life for years, shattered illusions about the incorruptibility of federal law enforcement, and highlighted the ongoing struggle between those who uphold the law and those who seek to subvert it from within.